It started with a vibration on the nightstand before the sun was up. I rolled over, expecting an alert from the server farm, but instead, I found my life collapsing in real time. Looking back, the timeline is almost funny in its brutality. The new VP fired me at 6 a.m. on a video call for disruptive leadership and said I couldn't align with executive direction. By 11 a.m., I'd signed with their competitor as chief systems architect. 9 days later, the company fell apart and their major clients called me. But at 5:47 that Wednesday morning, I didn't know I was winning. I only knew First Continental's transaction velocity was spiking. I needed to patch the leak before markets opened. I stumbled into the kitchen, linoleum cold against my bare feet, and cracked open my laptop. The screen glowed with a harsh blue light that stung my tired eyes. I typed my password, anticipating the dashboard of the system I had built from scratch. Instead, a red box flashed across the center of the display. Access denied. Contact administrator. My stomach dropped, a heavy weight plummeting. I tried again. Same error. Before I could process the glitch, my phone buzzed aggressively against the granite counter. It was a video call request. The name on the screen made my pulse stutter. Warren Hollister. He had copied Nina from HR. I rubbed my face, trying to scrub away the sleep and the sudden dread, then accepted the connection. Warren appeared instantly, sitting in his home office, wearing a suit that cost more than my car. He didn't say hello. He didn't ask about the outage I was trying to fix. Warren launched straight into a script he had clearly rehearsed in front of a mirror. He used words like strategic pivot and resource optimization, his voice smooth and utterly hollow. In the corner of the screen, Nina looked down at her desk, refusing to meet my eyes. She knew I was the only one who understood the legacy code, but she stayed silent while Warren swung the axe. Effective immediately. Warren said, finally landing the blow. Your access has been revoked. It hit me then. I had been online until midnight troubleshooting a database migration. They must have locked me out while I was sleeping, hours before this call even started. This wasn't about performance. This was a hit. Warren needed a scapegoat for the board meeting next week, and I was the perfect sacrifice. He smiled then, a tight, predatory expression. We wish you the best, Tim. The connection cut before I could say a single word. The screen went black, reflecting my stunned expression back at me. 7 years of building the company's infrastructure, endless nights, and missed holidays erased in a 3-minute call. The silence in the kitchen was deafening, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator. I stood there, trembling, holding a laptop that was now just a useless brick of aluminum. The sun was rising, painting the sky a bruised purple, but I felt incredibly cold. I sat in the dim kitchen for an hour, watching the coffee maker brew a pot I did not want. The silence felt heavy, pressing against my ears like deep water. Usually, by now, I would be checking Slack messages or reviewing overnight error logs. Instead, I just traced the grain of the wood table with a shaking finger. At 7:15, the bedroom door creaked open. Jenna shuffled out, wrapping her silk robe tight. She did not look at my face, she looked at the laptop. You are still here? She asked, her voice thick with sleep. I told her the truth simply, stripping away the emotion. Warren fired me. 10 minutes ago. I waited for the shock, the hug, maybe some anger on my behalf. Instead, Jenna froze, her hand halfway to the coffee mug. Her eyes narrowed, calculating instantly. What about the Cabo trip? She asked. I already put the deposit down on the villa. It was like a slap. Not asking if I was okay, but asking who pays. I stared at her, the woman I had lived with for 3 years. I just lost my career, Jenna. She scoffed, finally pouring her coffee with aggressive, jerky movements. You lost a job because you couldn't play the game. You are always so stubborn about your precious code. She leaned against the counter, sipping casually. I can't do this instability. I need someone who actually has a future. The cruelty was precise. She had been waiting for a valid excuse to say this. The speed of her exit was impressive. By 8 a.m., she had a suitcase on the bed. She was not packing everything, just the essentials, like she had a place to go already. I watched from the doorway, feeling a strange detachment. The grief I expected did not come. Instead, a cold clarity washed over me. "You aren't staying with your mom, are you?" I asked. She did not answer, just zipped the bag shut with a sharp, final hiss. She walked out. The front door slammed, shaking the frame. I was alone in the quiet apartment, surrounded by the ghosts of a life that existed yesterday. My phone buzzed on the counter, startling me. I almost ignored it, expecting a severance email from Nina, but the number was personal. It was Eddie from IT. "Yo, Tim. Using my burner. Check this screenshot." I opened the image. It was a raw log file from the security server. The timestamps were highlighted in bright neon yellow. The text under the image was frantic. "Look at the creation time, man. 4:47 p.m. yesterday." I zoomed in. The termination ticket had been generated while I was still in the office, hours before I stayed late to fix the database migration. Warren had signed the digital approval at 4:52 p.m. I felt a surge of adrenaline cut through the numbness. He had let me work all night to save the client, knowing full well I was already fired. Eddie's next message bubbled up. "It gets worse. He tried to get me to edit your badge, outlogs. Wants it to look like you left at 5 p.m. I told him logs are read only." I saved the screenshots immediately. This was not just a firing, it was a cover-up. Warren was scrubbing the record. My despair evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard anger. My phone rang again. Unknown number. I picked it up. "This is Cole," a voice said. "We should talk." I showered in 4 minutes, scrubbing off the feeling of being discarded like a dead skin cell. The drive to downtown Denver was a blur of aggressive lane changes and a white, knuckled grip on the steering wheel. I parked 2 blocks away from the Prism Financial Technologies building, taking a moment to breathe the cold city air. The structure was glass and steel, sharp edges cutting against the morning sky, looking nothing like the beige, sprawling campus I had just been exiled from. My phone buzzed with a LinkedIn notification. A recruiter already sniffing blood. I silenced it and stepped onto the pavement. The lobby smelled of espresso and ozone, a sharp contrast to the stale carpet cleaner scent of Vantage. I walked to the reception desk, expecting a clipboard and a suspicious glare. Instead, the young woman smiled and handed me a badge that had clearly been printed days ago. "Mr. Ashford is expecting you in the fishbowl," she said. I clipped the badge to my jacket, feeling its weight like a loaded weapon. People walked past me with purpose, laptops open, arguing about code in the open. It felt alive here, humming with an energy my old office had lost years ago. Cole Ashford met me at the elevator doors, skipping the intimidation tactics I was used to. He was older than I expected. Silver, haired but wearing a vintage band t-shirt under a tailored blazer. No tie. He didn't offer a handshake, he offered a nod of recognition. "Tim," he said, his voice gravelly and direct. I heard Warren finally pulled the trigger. I owe that man a thank you card. He turned and walked toward a corner office with glass walls, moving with the efficiency of someone who didn't waste seconds on posturing. We sat down, and the difference in leadership style was immediately apparent. His desk was cluttered with schematics and architecture diagrams, not motivational plaques or awards. "Let's skip the interview," Cole said, sliding a thick document across the mahogany surface. "I know what you built at Vantage. I also know Warren delayed the Sentinel launch this morning." I froze. That information wasn't public, it wasn't even company-wide yet. "How do you know that?" I asked. Cole grinned, a wolfish expression. "Because 3 of your engineers just emailed my CTO looking for life rafts. The ship is taking on water, Tim." I looked down at the paper. It was an employment contract, crisp and waiting. The title read Chief Systems Architect. I flipped to the compensation page, and the number made my breath hitch. Double my Vantage salary, plus meaningful equity that vested immediately. "Start date is today," Cole said, leaning back in his chair. We have a migration strategy to build. I want you to lead it. He tapped the desk with a pen. Your non-compete is void, by the way. Our legal team already reviewed your termination breach. You are a free agent. I picked up the pen, a heavy metal instrument that felt cold in my hand. It was 10:58 a.m. Less than 5 hours ago, I was unemployed, dumped, and obsolete. Now, I was holding the keys to the kingdom that would destroy my former masters. I thought of Warren's smug face on the video call. I thought of Jenna's suitcase zipping shut. The ink flowed smoothly onto the page as I signed my name. Welcome to the winning side, Cole said. Now, tell me exactly how broken their new system is. The first 2 days at Prism were a disorienting blur of efficiency. I was given a workstation with 3 monitors and actual admin privileges, tools I had begged Warren for since last Christmas. There were no pointless meetings about synergy, only deep dive code reviews that actually solved problems. But my phone kept vibrating with updates from the war zone I had left behind. Eddie was my correspondent from the trenches, sending encrypted messages via Signal. Dude, one read. Warren just locked himself in his office. He can't figure out the deployment keys. By Friday afternoon, the inevitable happened. Vantage officially announced a strategic postponement of the Sentinel launch. It was corporate speak for, we have no idea how this works. I read the press release on my new monitor, feeling a dark satisfaction curl in my chest. They were delaying the fraud detection update by 6 months. In this industry, 6 months is a lifetime. The systems were already straining under holiday volume. Without the patch I had architected, false positives would skyrocket. The bleeding had officially started. The fallout was instantaneous. My personal cell rang 10 minutes after the press release went live. The caller ID showed Theo Marchetti, the VP of Operations at First Continental Bank. He was Vantage's biggest client, a man who controlled a $40 million contract. I watched the phone ring, the screen lighting up my new desk. I could picture Theo pacing his corner office, tie loosened, sweating over the quarterly risk report. I let it go to voicemail. I wasn't their fixer anymore. I was their competition. An hour later, the phone rang again. This time, the name on the screen made the hair on my arms stand up. Warren Hollister. He had fired me via a scheduled video call, but now he was dialing my personal number like an old friend. I let it ring twice, savoring the power dynamic shift, before answering on speaker. This is Tim. My voice was steady, calm. The background noise on his end was chaotic. Shouting, phones ringing, the sound of a ship sinking. Tim, glad I caught you, Warren said, his voice strained, but trying for casual authority. We have hit a small snag with the integration layer. The team is struggling to interpret your documentation. He laughed nervously, a wet, unpleasant sound. I was thinking we could bring you in as a consultant. Short term, obviously. Just to guide the team through the transition, we can offer a standard hourly rate. The audacity was breathtaking. He wanted me to clean up the mess he made, so he could take the credit. I leaned back in my ergonomic chair, watching the Prism engineers whiteboard a solution down the hall. I don't think that's possible. Warren, I said, consulting for you would be a conflict of interest. I paused for effect. Besides, I don't think I can align with your executive direction. The silence on the line was absolute. I heard him take a sharp, ragged breath. He dropped the pretense instantly. Listen to me, he hissed. You wrote this code. If you sabotaged it, I will sue you into bankruptcy. I wouldn't talk about legal action, I said, my voice dropping an octave. Not when you have IT logs showing you altered security protocols to frame a firing. I waited a beat, letting the accusation land like a hammer. Eddie sends his regards, by the way. Warren sputtered, incoherent with rage and fear, but I didn't stay to listen. I ended the call and blocked the number. I looked at the dark screen. The bridge wasn't just burned, I had just detonated the pilings. The weekend passed in a blur of updates from Eddie. The situation inside Vantage was deteriorating faster than I had predicted. Security escorted 3 senior devs out today, Eddie texted. They refused to sign the retrospective NDA. I stared at my phone, feeling a mix of pity and validation. Warren was purging anyone who remembered how the system actually worked. He was trying to stop the leaks, but he was only poking holes in the hull. The ship wasn't just sinking. The captain was shooting the crew. By Monday, the narrative had shifted dangerously. Eddie sent a recording of the all-hands meeting where Warren's voice sounded shrill. He spun a tale of external sabotage and malicious code bombs left by disgruntled former employees. He was clearly talking about me. I listened to the lies through my headphones while my hands flew across my keyboard. I wasn't angry anymore. I was purely focused. Every lie gave me ammunition. He was making himself the victim, but he was accidentally positioning me as the only solution. I didn't go home that night. I stayed at Prism, fueled by the freedom to finally build things correctly. This wasn't the exhausting, thankless overtime of Vantage. I mapped out a migration protocol that could pull First Continental's data in 48 hours, bypassing the corrupted nodes Warren was struggling with. Cole stopped by at 2 a.m. He didn't ask me to stop. He just looked at the whiteboards filled with diagrams. "You are enjoying this," he said. He was right. It felt like I was weaponizing my competence. My phone buzzed at 4 a.m., vibrating against the mahogany desk. It was Jenna. "Hey, did you get the severance packet yet? Need to know for rent." No apology. No question about where I was sleeping. Just a transactional inquiry from a woman who had already moved on. I typed a response, then deleted it. She was part of the old life. I put the phone face down. She didn't deserve to know my new signing bonus could buy the apartment. By Wednesday, the trap was set. Theo from First Continental called Cole directly, bypassing Vantage's protocol. I sat in the room as they spoke on speakerphone. Theo sounded exhausted, his patience eroded by days of silence. "We need a lifeboat, Cole," Theo said. "Vantage is dark. They aren't answering tickets." Cole looked at me and winked. "I have your architect right here, Theo, and he has a plan." We scheduled the pitch for Friday. It wasn't just a sales meeting, it was a rescue mission. Thursday afternoon brought the most damning piece of intelligence yet. Eddie sent a photo taken surreptitiously from behind a potted plant. It showed Warren in the main glass-walled conference room, red-faced and screaming at a junior analyst. His perfect suit jacket was thrown on the floor. Even without audio, the body language screamed panic. "He's losing it," Eddie texted. "He just smashed a tablet." The employees outside the glass looked terrified. Warren was destroying the company culture in real time, validating every warning I had ever given him. I was packing my presentation materials when the landline on my desk rang. It wasn't a client. It was the chair of the board for Vantage. I recognized the number from the emergency contact list I used to manage. Warren wasn't calling anymore. His bosses were. They had likely seen the exodus of talent and the silence from the product team. I let it ring 4 times. I picked up the receiver, my voice cold. "This is Tim. I am afraid you have the wrong number." The boardroom at First Continental smelled of stale coffee and expensive anxiety. I walked in flanking Cole, carrying nothing but a slim laptop. 12 executives sat around the heavy oak table, their faces tight with stress. Theo Marchetti looked like he hadn't slept in a week, his tie loosened and eyes rimmed with red. They were bleeding money every hour Vantage remained offline. I didn't smile or offer platitudes. I plugged in my HDMI cable, the click echoing in the silence. The screen flickered to life, showing a stark, clean dashboard. "Let's stop the bleeding," I said. I didn't mention Warren's name once. It would have been unprofessional and unnecessary. The numbers on the screen spoke for themselves. I pulled up the real-time transaction monitor, a tool I had rebuilt on Prism's architecture over the last 48 hours. "Your current rejection rate is hovering at 18%. I explained, pointing to the red line spiking on the graph. "That isn't fraud. That is system failure." The CTO, a stern woman named Reynolds, leaned forward. She narrowed her eyes at the data. Vantage told us that was a global market fluctuation, she said sharply. It is not a fluctuation. I countered, keeping my voice even. It is a latency timeout in their legacy verification layer. Reynolds crossed her arms, clearly skeptical of a miracle cure. We have been trying to integrate the Swift 7 protocol for 2 years, she said. Vantage said it was mathematically impossible without a total core rewrite. This was the moment. This was the lie Warren had sold them to cover his budget cuts. I tapped a few keys, bringing up a terminal window. It is not impossible, I said. It just required someone who read the documentation. I executed the script. The room went silent as the terminal scrolled green text, processing a batch of test transactions instantly. On the main dashboard, the rejection rate line plummeted from 18% to a negligible 0.2%. The speed was visceral. Theo let out a breath he seemed to have been holding since Monday. That is live, he asked, his voice barely a whisper. That is live traffic, I confirmed. We routed a segment of your API through Prism's engine 5 minutes ago. I looked at Cole. He was leaning back, watching the room realize they were saved. Reynolds wasn't done yet. She looked from the screen to me, her expression shifting from skepticism to calculation. This integration violates our exclusivity clause with Vantage, she noted. If we switch traffic to you, we are in breach of contract. Cole stepped in then, his voice smooth as silk. Actually, Vantage breached first, he said. By failing to meet the uptime SLA for 3 consecutive days, your exclusivity is null and void. He slid a legal opinion across the table. Our lawyers drafted this yesterday. You are free to leave them. The sound of paper sliding was heavy. Theo picked up the document, but he didn't read it. He looked directly at me. Tim, be honest, he said. If we stay with Vantage, can they fix this? I held his gaze. I remembered the years we spent building their safety net, and I remembered Warren firing me at dawn. Vantage doesn't have the talent left to fix a printer, Theo, I said. The people who built your system are gone. It was a brutal truth. Theo nodded slowly, closing his eyes for a second. He knew exactly what I meant. The trust was gone. I tried to call Warren this morning, Theo admitted, his voice hardening. I tried yesterday, too. He looked around the table at his colleagues. Does anyone know when the last time the VP of Operations actually responded to a P1 ticket? Reynolds checked her phone. Tuesday, she said. He stopped replying to emails 3 days ago. The realization rippled through the room. Warren hadn't just failed them, he had abandoned them. He was hiding in his office while their money burned. That was the nail in the coffin. Incompetence they could forgive, cowardice they would not. Theo took a gold pen from his pocket. It was the same pen he had used to sign the renewal with Vantage last year, back when I stood on the other side of this table. How fast can you migrate the full database? He asked. 48 hours for full redundancy, I answered immediately. But we can take the critical load right now. Theo uncapped the pen. He didn't look at his colleagues for approval. He just signed the bottom of Cole's letter of intent. The scratch of the nib was the loudest sound in the building. We walked out of the conference room 10 minutes later with a signed contract worth millions. The adrenaline was starting to fade, replaced by a deep, bone-weary exhaustion. Cole clapped me on the shoulder as the elevator doors closed, sealing us in the quiet steel box. You just killed a company. Tim, he said, sounding impressed and slightly terrified. I didn't kill them. I corrected him, watching the floor numbers tick down. I just stopped performing CPR on a corpse. The metaphor felt apt. I had finally let go of the dead weight I had been dragging for years. My phone buzzed as we hit the lobby. It was Eddie, sending me a live update from the blast radius. Holy shit, the text read. Legal just sprinted into Warren's office. Security is standing by the elevators with a cardboard box. I stopped walking, staring at the screen. The timing was impeccable. Theo must have emailed his termination notice the second we left the room. I showed the screen to Cole. He laughed, a short, sharp bark. Looks like your old boss is about to have a lot of free time, he said. Maybe he can learn to code. 9 days after I was fired, the guillotine finally fell on Warren. Eddie sent me the by-play in real time, narrating the execution like a sportscaster. Security escorted Warren out at 4 p.m. on a Friday, carrying a single cardboard box containing a wireless mouse and a motivational poster about synergy. He tried to argue for his parking spot, but the guard just took his badge. It was a pathetic, quiet end to the man who had tried to be a titan. He walked out into the parking lot, and nobody looked up from their desks to wave goodbye. The aftermath was a slow, motion collapse that was fascinating to watch from the outside. Vantage's stock plummeted 40% in the following quarter. The interim CEO, a panic hire from the board, tried to stem the bleeding, but the trust was gone. Clients didn't just leave because of the tech. They left because they realized the culture was rotten. Meanwhile, Prism was thriving. We absorbed the refugees. The best engineers, the smartest analysts, people who fled Vantage's sinking ship for the stability we offered. My team grew from 15 to 90 in a year. I stopped looking back. The anger that had fueled my first few weeks burned out, replaced by the steady hum of building something real. I was promoted to VP of Engineering 8 months in. I had autonomy, a team that respected the code, and a CEO who understood that you don't fire your architect at dawn. I slept 7 hours a night. I met friends for dinner. The knot of anxiety that had lived in my chest for 3 years slowly unraveled. I thought I was done with Vantage, but the universe has a sense of humor. 18 months after the video call, Cole walked into my office with a strange expression. "You are not going to believe who is on line 1, he said. It was the chair of Vantage's board. They weren't calling to threaten us anymore, they were calling to surrender. The fraud division was underwater, a liability dragging down their payment processing unit. They wanted to sell. They wanted to know if Prism was interested in acquiring the assets. The code, the patents, and the building, for pennies on the dollar. We flew to their headquarters for the meeting. Walking into that building felt surreal. The lobby was quieter than I remembered. The plants dusty, the energy drained. The receptionist asked for my ID, not recognizing the man who used to run the place. We took the elevator to the top floor, the same metal box where I used to dread the morning commute. It felt smaller now. The boardroom was half empty. The board members looked tired, defeated men trying to salvage a scrap of dignity from a disaster of their own making. The negotiation was short. We didn't have to haggle. They were desperate to offload the operational costs. We offered 30 cents on the dollar for the intellectual property and the infrastructure. I sat across from the man who had approved my firing, and he couldn't even meet my gaze. I flipped through the asset list, seeing the names of systems I had built, now being sold back to me as distressed inventory. It wasn't revenge, it was just business. But it felt like justice. We signed the papers at noon. The pen didn't feel heavy. It felt like a gavel. With a few signatures, Prism acquired Vantage's fraud division. I wasn't just an employee anymore. I was the owner of the very mechanism that had tried to crush me. Cole shook hands with the chair, but I just nodded. We walked out of the conference room, and for the first time, I walked toward the executive wing, not away from it. The office that used to belong to Warren was empty, stripped bare of his pretension. Eddie found me there an hour later. He was still wearing his hoodie, but he looked lighter. "This is insane," he said, spinning in the expensive ergonomic chair. "A year and a half ago, I was clearing your termination ticket. Now you literally own the building." He laughed, shaking his head. "That's movie stuff." "Tim," I looked out the window at the parking lot where Warren had been marched out. "It's not a movie, Eddie," I said. "It's just what happens when you bet on competence." That evening, I stayed late to finish the integration roadmap. The building was empty, silent in a way that felt peaceful rather than lonely. I walked down the hall to my old cubicle. It was occupied by a junior dev now, cluttered with different photos, different dreams. I realized then that I didn't miss it. I didn't miss the struggle. I walked back to the corner office, the one with the view of the mountains. I sat behind the massive desk, feeling the leather creak. My phone buzzed on the mahogany surface. It was a text from Jenna. I hadn't heard from her since she moved out. Heard the news about the acquisition. The message read, "That's amazing, Tim. We should grab coffee and catch up." I stared at the words, remembering the suitcase zipping shut, the cold calculation in her eyes when I was down. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel anything. I deleted the thread and turned my chair to watch the sunset over the city I had conquered. I was packing my bag when the intercom buzzed. The security officer sounded hesitant. "Mr. Caraway, a Miss Jenna is here. She says it's urgent." I hesitated, hand hovering over the receiver, but curiosity won out. "Send her up." When the elevator doors slid open, she didn't look like the confident woman who had stormed out of our apartment. She looked smaller, wearing a cheap coat, clutching her purse like a shield. She stepped into the executive suite, her eyes scanning the luxury. The marble floor reflected her worn heels. "Tim," she started, her voice soft. "I know I shouldn't be here." She walked closer, resting a hand on the leather chair I had just vacated. "I made a mistake. Leaving the way I did. I panicked." She looked at me, eyes shimmering with tears that felt rehearsed. He wasn't who I thought he was. I miss Asta. It was a performance. I watched her, waiting for the old pang of guilt or longing to hit me. It never arrived. I just felt a profound boredom. "You didn't panic, Jenna," I said, my voice flat. "You calculated." I picked up my briefcase, signaling the conversation was over. "You left because you thought my value hit zero. Now that the stock price is up, you want to buy back in." She flinched, her mask slipping to reveal the anger underneath. "That isn't fair," she snapped. I was scared. I walked past her toward the elevator. "Fair doesn't matter. Loyalty does. You failed the stress test." I hit the button, not looking back. The elevator arrived with a cheerful ding. Jenna stared at me, realizing her leverage was gone. She stepped inside, the steel doors sliding shut to cut her out of my life permanently. The elevator's hum faded, and the server room door burst open. Eddie walked out, holding a tablet and wearing a grin that split his face. "Was that the ex?" he asked. "She looked like she stepped in something wet." I laughed, the sound genuine and light. "She did," I said. "She stepped into reality." Eddie tapped his screen. "Migration is 99% complete. The legacy servers are decommed." He looked at me, expecting a nod, but I handed him a sealed envelope. "Open it," I said. He tore the flap, pulling out a letter on prism letterhead. His eyes widened as he read the figure on the bonus check. It matched his old annual salary. "Tim, is this a typo?" He looked up, stunned. "Loyalty has a premium, Eddie," I told him. "Consider it back pay for being decent." Eddie walked away, staring at the check like it was a holy relic. I turned off the lights, leaving only the glow of the city through the glass. I stood there, watching the traffic below, a river of red and white lights. I wasn't just a fixer anymore, I was the architect of my own life. Some doors close because they were never meant to be open. Sometimes, the best outcome is getting fired at dawn by someone who didn't know your worth.